Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Well, there are times in your life that you simply never forget, whether it's meeting your partner, you remember that first time you see them, your wedding day, if that's a path you choose, and the sold sticker going up on your first home. Very important times that you don't forget. And those 4 letters on that sign, they're a culmination of years of hard work, savings and sacrifice for a place to call your own. It's the great Australian dream, and it's still very much alive, but there's no doubt that that dream is under extreme pressure right across the country, including in my electorate of Casey. And Australians of all ages are working hard to take their first steps on the property ladder. And we know that 85% of renters aspire to own their own home. And as policymakers, we have a responsibility to do what we can to help all Australians reach their potential and to reach that great Australian dream. And as a first principle, we as a country need to create a situation where any Australian that wants to own a home should have the opportunity to own a home. However, this scheme that we are talking about, the shared equity scheme and the Help to Buy bill, is not going to achieve that for the Australian people. And we know it's not the answer, because the uptake of shared equity schemes in state jurisdictions show that. Now, Labor's plan is for the federal government to contribute 40% of the purchase price of a new home, or 30% of an existing dwelling. And they talk about their policy saving home buyers up to 40% of the money needed for a deposit. What they fail to mention, however, is the upwards of 40% tax that home buyers will face upon selling their home or throughout the life of the loan in paying the government back their 40% share. Because under Labor's scheme, you own part of your home and the government owns the percentage that they contributed. Australians want to be able to own their own home, but they don't want Anthony Albanese and the government sitting at the kitchen table waiting for their slice of the profits in years to come. So even though we've got a lot of challenges, Deputy Speaker, about this bill that I'm going to talk to, this bill is another example of this government promising a lot and not delivering on it, because they promised, with all its flaws, that this scheme would be introduced by the 1st of January 2023. And here we are in February 2024, 13 months later, and it's finally been introduced. And this is in the midst of a housing crisis. So it's a bad bill that's not going to make a difference, but they're not even living up to the word that they promised to bring it in over 12 months ago. And it relies on working with the states to make these schemes work. However, as I said before, we already know that there is not full uptake of these schemes in states. In Victoria, where I live, the Home Buyer Fund, which is a shared equity scheme, was anticipated to assist up to 13,000 households. So far, there has only been 2,874 successful applicants, a significant gap in Victoria. In South Australia, their Home Start shared equity loans began in 2007, and a total of 705 loans have been offered in total, 705 loans since 2007. And according to the 2021 census, there were 14,254 dwellings being purchased under a shared equity scheme. Now, this comprises 0.13% of the 10.8 million private dwellings in Australia. And this is what we see time and time again with the Albanese Labor government, and the Australian public have worked them out. There's a big headline, there's a big announcement, but it's actually not making a difference to improving people's lives. And they're spruiking this scheme like it will solve all of the problems of the Australian people when it comes to housing affordability, but we know it won't, and we know there's not an appetite for schemes like this because we see it in the data and the uptake in states all across the country. And this is one of the challenges we have with this government. They talk about this being the solution. We've seen the uptake's not there. But even if the uptake was subscribed fully, it's 10,000 Australians each financial year at a cost of $5.5 billion to the Commonwealth Government. So even if it was fully uptaken, 10,000 people, but we know it's not going to be. But, Deputy Speaker, there is an even more significant challenge with this scheme and these bills, and it is in the detail and the unintended consequences that we need to look at and we should be looking at as lawmakers. And I was recently contacted by a constituent who purchased her first home using a shared equity scheme in Victoria, similar to this method Labor is proposing. Now, she is a professional woman who works in the finance industry, and I'd like to share, with her permission, a part of what she wrote so we can understand the unintended consequences of these schemes. And I quote, "I was fortunate to buy my first home using the Victorian Home Buyers Fund program with a 15% equity share with the Victorian Government. It put me in a position to create a home for myself and my 2 children, providing security and safety. I have a good understanding of my budget and accounted for interest rate rises when purchasing. I am proud of the way I have managed my money as a single parent in the face of rising interest rates and cost of living. Unfortunately, I have recently discovered that I need to have brain surgery for a tumour in my brain. I anticipate I will need around 2 months off work with full recovery to take up to 12 months. I've been proactive in preparing for this unexpected event and recently contacted my bank about getting assistance with my mortgage. I qualify for hardship, but when going through the options for hardship, it was limited due to the shared equity program. Both options available to me meant that once I was out of hardship, my repayments would increase to recoup the lost time and payments. I was advised that my repayments would increase by $29 a fortnight to keep me within the loan term. I know this might not seem like a lot, but for me, it was a significant amount. The other option I had was increasing the loan term, which wouldn't impact my repayments. However, this option isn't available to me under the shared equity scheme. Being a single parent, I'm already finding cost of living difficult. We don't go on holidays, we don't have subscriptions. I cover the basics and that is it. I feel that I should have the same options available to me as other mortgage holders and not be disadvantaged for participating in a program designed to make home ownership easier. And I want to thank my constituent for sharing that story. And it's an example of why the details matter when it comes to programs like this. It is not about putting it through so the Prime Minister and others can stand up and talk about how they're trying to make a difference. And we saw that in state Labor's shared equity scheme. This person has been caught up because the details are not clear. And that's the reality of Labor's scheme. It leaves us with more questions than answers. What happens if you make improvements to your home? Will you have to send an invoice to ask for approval to renovate your bathroom, to fix your roof? Will the ATO be auditing incomes to ensure income doesn't rise above the eligibility threshold? What happens if the market falls? Will you be forced to sell your house for less than you paid for it? And what lenders are participating in the scheme? And importantly, can the government guarantee that people taking up this scheme won't be caught in the same situation as my constituent, in being limited in the hardship options when they desperately need it? These are questions that the government aren't able to answer, and that's why the detail matters. There's only really one certainty about Labor's Help to Buy scheme, and that's when it comes time to sell, home buyers will be hit with a housing tax of 40% as the government takes back its share. Now, it doesn't seem fair and reasonable that if you own a property jointly with the government, it's your responsibility for all the repairs, all the maintenance, all the rates bills, everything else associated with the house. You've got to pay for all of that. However, when it comes time to sell, the government comes and takes their 40% back. It's not a bad deal for the government. All the perks, none of the responsibilities. Now, we hear those opposite talk about the coalition in the last 10 years, and they like to say that nothing was done. The problem with that statement is it doesn't bear out in the facts, and the coalition has a proud record in helping Australians into home ownership. And our approach is to support aspiration and helps make home ownership a reality. In the last 3 years of the coalition government, our policies saw more than 300,000 Australians purchase homes. Under the coalition, first home buyers reached their highest levels in 15 years. We established the National Housing and Finance Investment Corporation, now Housing Australia, which supported over 21,000 social and affordable homes. More than 60,000 first home buyers and single-parent families picked up the keys to their first home through the Coalition's Home Guarantee Scheme, helping avoid costly lenders' mortgage insurance. And we took to the election a suite of home buyer policies that which would have delivered, including the Super Home Buyer Scheme, which allows first home buyers to invest up to 40% of their super, or up to $500,000, to help with the purchase of their home. Now, the great thing, Deputy Speaker, about this scheme is that you would own all of your home, but some argue that it's a trade-off for your retirement savings by putting it into housing. But under this scheme, a homeowner, when they sell that house, are required to put that equity into their superannuation and into their retirement. So let's compare and contrast the policies. The Coalition believes that superannuation is your money. We believe that home ownership is crucial to security and safety and engagement with your community. And we want to allow Australians to take some of their money, their savings, out of superannuation to put it into home ownership. 40%, same amount as the government scheme. But then we're saying that when you sell that house, you get to keep 100% of the equity increase in that house. And you're required to put that 40% growth into your superannuation to look after your retirement. But what does this government say? You can't do that. You can't touch your money in superannuation. We will give you that money. We will give you that money, but we'll take 40% of your house. And if that increases in value and you sell it, we'll take that 40% back. How does that help Australians with their retirement? And any costs that you've incurred along the way, any maintenance, any improvements you've made, well, we'll just take our 40% on top of that. And that's the reality of this scheme. We're seeing that people understand this. That's why the uptake is so low at state level. This is a new scheme that's not required because there are so many places already available. The Australian people have spoken with their feet. If they wanted these schemes, they would already sign up to them at the state level, but they're not, because they don't want the Australian government owning 40% of their home. This is a policy that is designed to allow the Prime Minister in his campaign launch to stand up and talk about cheaper mortgages, when the reality is mortgages have gone up 12 times under this government. It's not going to deliver a tangible difference for the Australian people. We've seen that and we know, and that's the reality of this government. It's all spin, it's all politics, it's not providing tangible solutions to the housing crisis for the Australian people.
The question is that this bill be now read